Now to your questions. The first question is, my child takes stimulants for his ADHD. Does this worsen his anxiety, do you think?
Stimulant medications can worsen people's anxiety, but they can also help it. They are not the primary medicines that we use for treating anxiety, but some people who get stimulant medicines, which work quite well for ADHD if you get the dose right, and it make things easier for social anxiety, and some of them make it more difficult. One thing which happens a lot is that there are some physicians who've not had very much training in recognizing that the dosing for the medicines that we use, stimulant medicines we use for treating ADD, don't go by how old you are or how much you weigh or how severe your symptoms are. It's how sensitive is your body to that particular medicine. And so the fine tuning of the medicine needs to be done on an individualized basis. And if it's not, then that gets you into things where people will say, well, I've tried all those medicines for ADD. And then you start asking about it. You find sometimes they were being given doses that were way too small, and others people have been given doses way too big. And usually if you can hit that right, social anxiety may be reduced a little bit by it, but often they need a different medicine that will help to reduce the anxiety itself.
Okay. We had some questions around how to help children develop self-awareness in social situations in a way that fosters confidence rather than anxiety. So one question is, what intervention can support them in building healthy self-regulation skills without reinforcing anxiety-driven inhibition?
Well, I think it depends on the kid, how old and personality of the kid. But the main thing that's helpful is having experience in interacting with other people. And so parents who are able to help their kids from an early age play with other kids and, supervise, of course, when they're very young, and then learning how to do it more freely. And you do it a little bit at a time. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but there are some people who find that much more difficult than most other kids of the same age. And I think, getting to the point where a child can be comfortable in, perhaps, for example, attending birthday parties. And at first, it may, with the younger kids, often many of the parents will stick around during the party and with the very young kids, and then older later. But to encourage a child, keep in mind that there's some kids for whom it's great fun to do this, and they're very happy to do it. But there's some kids where they're just very frightened about it, and they need some encouragement to be able to go and interact with kids and gradually develop the skills that most of the other kids may be picking up much more easily.
Okay, we have a question from a teacher. She says, how should I balance being empathetic, but also help a student develop resiliency skills?
Well, I think that's a good concern for teachers, because what it means is that this teacher is realizing that some of these things that many of the rest of the classmates can do are very nervous-making for a few kids, and then others don't have any trouble with it. But sometimes the teacher needs to spend a little time individually with the child when they see that they're particularly avoidant about it, and to acknowledge, to say, there are a lot of kids who, don't worry much about playing with other kids or going to birthday parties with other kids. But there are just some people who it takes them a little longer to be able to feel comfortable with that. And in my class, I want to encourage you to do activities with other kids. I'm going to assign you to do projects and so forth with other people, just like I would anybody else. And certainly be glad to talk with you about that. But I don't want you to, just stay away from that, because the more you stay away from it, the harder it gets.
Okay. A parent asks, is there such a thing as too much time alone? Do I respect my child's wishes to do their own thing, or is it just avoidance and he needs help?
It could be either. I think it's a good question to be asking. If your son or daughter is just not spending much time with other kids, particularly to watch this when they're younger, it's important to try and get them to invite some kids over to your house, just one or two that he or she is able to feel comfortable with, and then encourage them to accept invitations to go to parties if they are invited, and I think if you've got a kid who just wants to stay in the house and watch TV or play video games all the time, and who's just not doing much in the way of interacting with other kids for any other activities, that's likely to become a bigger problem. And it may be you're dealing with a kid whose social anxiety is just greater than it is for most others. And what you end up having to do is just to put some pressure on them to do it. And you don't want to make a big campaign out of it, but look for opportunities to be able to get some of the kids that he or she is familiar with a little bit, and get them to do some homework together, or take the kids together to some, whether it's to watch a baseball game or to see a movie. Parents play an important role in helping kids to be able to tolerate the interaction with other kids, if they happen to be kids who worry a lot about that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the main thing is not just to shake your finger at them and say, you got to stay, you got to do this all the time. You don't want to overdose it. Some people are, much more interested in playing with other kids their own age or that sort of thing, and some isolate themselves more. But the main thing is, if you're dealing with somebody who seems to be particularly anxious about it, it's important to look for ways of being able to get them a little more experience from the earliest years to interacting with other people. If you've got a kid who's having quite a bit of difficulty, or sometimes, say if the family moves and you're in a new community, a new school, and everybody is new, and there's that whole process. For some, it's an interesting change and it's fine, and other kids, it's terrifying. And some may need a little bit of extra help from a counselor at school, or possibly even from other relatives, or from a psychotherapist, because for some people it's just a bigger struggle to deal with the intensity of that anxiety.
Mm-hmm. A parent writes, when my child is spiraling and running through how she thinks others perceive her, what can I do in the moment to pull her out of this?
I think the first thing is, don't shut it off immediately. Listen to what the child is hearing and telling you about. And then ask some questions about the details. See if you can get any clues about what people are reacting to that make him or her be getting negative feedback from the other kids. And that requires the empathy to think about how the child's feeling, but also the strength to be able to help the kid be able to talk about these things, and to be able to gradually to get to do some things with other kids. Have them come over to your house once in a while, or encourage sometimes when parents might hang out with other parents and bring the kids along. But it's not something that's done all at one time. If you're usually going to see, if you've got a child who, excuse me, I'm going to blow my nose. If you see your kids having trouble with this kind of stuff, the easy thing is just to let them stay in the house and not push it. but you don't want to push it too much so that it's way too much for them to handle at a time. But it's important to look for opportunities uh, to help them to be able to get more interactive with other kids their own.
This question is similar to the teen who was spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
How to best help my teen overcome negative thinking patterns?
Yeah, well, one thing is that I would encourage is let them tell you what they're thinking, and then if it's not clear, find out where that's coming from. What are people saying, or how are people acting that makes them think of this as negative feedback, as it might be. But so the first thing is, don't just shut it down and act as though that's ridiculous. I don't want to hear any more of that. Inquire and try and get some picture of what the difficulties are, and then gradually look for ways of addressing it. Now, if you can do this when your child is very young, it's a lot easier. If you're dealing with teenagers or in college-age kids, they're more challenging, but it can be helped. But the main thing is to be sensitive to the fact that the fear that the person with social anxiety experiences is scary stuff. There's some, everybody has a little bit of it. All of us worry sometimes about whether the outfit we're putting on to go to this party or whether what we said in class when we had to get up and give a report, every one of us at times is going to be wondering about, how well it's going over. But I think that's important to acknowledge. And especially if you have had experience, remember the heritability of this issue. If you or your spouse, if you're dealing with your children, has grown up with some periods when you had some difficulties with this, then it doesn't make the kid feel as though this is insurmountable, because hopefully you're able to show and they can see from you that you're able to learn how to do these things, and that you can help them to be able to learn.
Okay. A mom says, my son is 12 and is taking medication for ADHD while at school. He's concerned that his friends won't like his behavior or personality outside of school when he's off his medication, so he avoids getting together with them. Do you have suggestions on how to navigate this? Yes.
I think that often people think that all they have to do with the ADHD is to give the medicine for school day activity. And the fact is that most of the so-called long-acting medications for ADHD, if you give it to them at 8 or 8:30 in the morning, it's often pooping out by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, for some people, it will last longer, but it often does not last as long as the manufacturer might ask you to think. And anybody who works a lot with kids or adults with ADHD usually recognizes that it's necessary. The so-called long-acting medications don't last that long. And at least in our clinic, most of the people who need the medication, for school, many of them also need it for after-school stuff. And you can use the long-acting to give it early in the morning, and then at the end of the school day, or sometimes at lunchtime, give another dose where you bring it down a little bit. And then very often, if you're using the short-acting versions, short-acting usually kicks in a half hour, does its thing for about 4 hours, then it's done. Long-acting may last for 6 or 7 hours. Some people not so much. And there are many people who prefer to use doses a day, 3 short-acting doses a day, if you're not a kid who would have to go to the nurse at lunchtime to get the pill. But I think it's really important if you're dealing with ADHD to recognize that there are some people where they do need it mainly for getting their homework done. I've got some people who don't need it when they're in school, but they do need it for getting their homework done after school or early evening. And then there are other people who just need it for school, but there are many people for whom it's very helpful for them to have that medication at school and then after school and also in the evening. Hopefully the prescriber will be somebody who's sensitive to the various needs of this particular person. And these are the medicines used for ADHD are not medicines where you have to maintain the same level in your bloodstream all the time. It's quite possible to start with a bigger dose in the morning and then a little lower dose in the afternoon, and then a still lower dose in the afternoon or in the early evening to help them deal with the homework or the social interactions. And adults who are taking medicine, similar situation. There's some people with ADD who need that medicine more in dealing with their family when they get home than they need it at work.